Log Horizon, Volume 2, Chapter 1, Part 2.
Whoa, what the heck? This is awesome!
Naotsuku's muttered words seemed overcome with emotion. A campfire crackled in front of the five, sending up sparks. My liege, this is... what's the word? Paradise! Even Akatsuki, who was normally almost too serious and rarely showed much emotion, raised her voice happily, her flushed cheeks tinted by the orange flames. Shiroi nodded in response, but he wasn't exactly calm either. He was worked up. It was only that Shiroi, hopelessly clumsy, couldn't make the excitement show through in his attitude.
There's lots more where that came from.
As if he couldn't even hear Nyanta's reassurance, Naotsuku chowed down single-mindedly. Fragrant venison roasted, the fat crackling and popping. That in itself was a major event. It had begun when Nyanta and Akatsuki had brought back a deer they had bagged while gathering firewood. Wild animals weren't rare in this other world. On the contrary, here, where the population of Japan was only 1/100th of what it was in the real world, wild animals had an environment so suited to breeding that it must have seemed like heaven. This meant that in forests, hill country, and other lush areas, it was common to see deer and wild birds, as well as boars, mountain goats, and other livestock turned feral. Of course, there were dangerous animals like wild dogs, wolves, and bears as well. Boars and bears in particular had formidable fighting abilities, comparable to goblins, so caution was necessary. However, if they avoided those few dangerous animals, deer and wild birds were relatively easy to deal with, and they were useful both as food resources and as perfect practice opponents for low-level adventurers. Thus, it had come as no great surprise when Akatsuki and Nyanta returned from the forest where they'd been gathering kindling with a deer in tow. Under the perplexed eyes of Shiroi's group, Nyanta had dressed the deer and, wonder of wonders, produced venison shish kebabs that were shockingly tasty. Even the way they sizzled and crackled over the fire was completely unlike everything that had come before. The sweet scent of roasting fat. The realization that real food had such a complex, rich aroma was astounding. Shiroi and the others were suddenly so hungry it felt as if they hadn't eaten for days, and they couldn't take it anymore. With one bite of the slices that Nyanta held out for them, their senses were flooded with the melting sweetness of meat juices flavored with salt and rosemary. This wasn't a food item, it was food. When the difference stared them in the face like this, it was overwhelming. They were as different as lightning bugs and lightning. It's delicious. But why? Even Shiroi couldn't help but sound startled. Naotsuku and Akatsuki were dumbfounded too. Only Sarada and Nyanta beamed proudly. It was the most delicious meal they'd had in a month. Part of the sad reality of this other world was, or should have been, the rule that none of the food items tasted like anything. That rule had plagued Shiroi and his friends, and each of the more than 30,000 Japanese players who'd been trapped here, with a taste of despair. Whether they ate omelets or curry, pottage or grilled fish, the food tasted like nothing more than soggy rice crackers. Worse actually, since they didn't even taste very salty. It was so bad that Naotsuku had labeled it edible cardboard. Over the past few weeks, they had despaired utterly and resigned themselves to the logic of this other world. And now, right before their eyes, that logic was disintegrating. As far as cooking went, what Nyanta had made for them wasn't very complicated, and there was nothing pretentious about it. He dressed the deer, flavored it with spices, herbs, and rock salt, sautéed it in a frying pan, and roasted it right over the fire. It might not have been first-rate fare, but compared to the soggy, unsalted rice crackers that had darkened their days, the taste was heavenly.
Yum! This is fantastic! Captain Nyanta, you're amazing! I love you second best right after panties!
You're making too much of this. As Nyanta spoke, he threaded the venison onto meat skewers he had taken out of his bag, and began to roast them one after another. Sarada, who was sitting next to him demurely, knees together, busily set out dishes and used a small knife to peel an onion for garnish.
Captain! Hey, Maestro Nyanta! Why does it taste like this? I mean, why doesn't it taste like rice crackers? Requesting testimony from the defendant's city!
As he asked his question, Naotsuku had a skewer in each hand. You can have as much as you like, but no need to wolf it down like that, Nyanta told him, but Naotsuku didn't seem to believe him. It was as if he couldn't quite relax without gripping what he was planning to eat. Ordinarily, it would have been Akatsuki's job to hit him with a, "Greedy, stupid Naotsuku," but even she was muttering, "Delicious. Wow. Amazing," as she munched busily on the roast venison. As Nyanta dexterously carved the organs, he continued. When you cook, you collect all the ingredients, select the dish you want to make from the menu, then you have a finished food item, correct? What he was describing was the ordinary item creation method in Elder Tales. When you cook like that, no matter what you do, the finished food item has that particular flavor. All you have to do is collect the ingredients and cut, roast, or boil them directly without opening the menu, just like in the real world. Nyanta's explanation was quite casual. But Akatsuki gulped down the meat. Shiroi handed her a canteen, finishing the sentence for her. We tried that, but even by that method, the end result is just a mystery item, isn't it? When we tried to grill fish, it turned into a slimy paste or into weird charcoal that had nothing to do with fish. It isn't possible to cook normally in this world, is it? From what he and the others knew, that was simply how things worked here. Since this was a game, if one lacked game skills, they would fail. It was basic logic. That's what happens when you aren't a chef, or if you're a chef but your cooking skills are poor. As in reality, to cook, you need cooking skills. In other words, if chefs cook in the usual way, without using the menu, the flavors of the ingredients will shine through in the resulting dish. Although Shiroi was dumbfounded by Nyanta's words, he was soon convinced. When he thought about it, their salting of food items before consuming them had already been odd already. If it had only been possible to create food from the food menu, wouldn't they have had to select salt food from the menu to be able to add salt at all? Players had a minimum of 5 experience points in the production classes, including chef, even if they hadn't acquired those classes. Even though it was one of the most rudimentary cooking operations, the act of salting food appeared to be the most advanced, realistic cooking technique possible for any player with a non-chef subclass.
Then, Captain, does that mean...
That's right, Natsuguchi. I'm a chef. Now how about another skewer? With Nyanta's encouragement, Shiroi and the others dug into the meat. A mid-sized deer was enough to feed 5 with plenty left over. It would probably prove to be all the food they needed the next day as well. Nyanta passed around an apple brandy he said he'd made up in Susukino, and the lively nocturnal banquet continued. Once again, Nyanta formally introduced Serara to the other 3. Serara stood politely from where she'd been sitting by the campfire with the others and bobbed her head. It's nice to meet you. I apologize for not greeting you sooner. I'm Serara. Thank you very much for rescuing me. I'm a level 19 druid, my subclass is housekeeper, and I'm still really new at everything. She sure is an energetic girl. Many things about her combined to give Shiroi that impression. Her tranquil, girlish face, her small, round, gently sloping shoulders, the hair tied into a ponytail that hung down her back.
It's like, in terms of the 3 cutest girls in class, you'd be number 3, but you'd get the most love letters. Huh?
At this discombobulating assessment from Naotsugu, whom she'd only just met, Serara found herself at a loss for words. Akatsuki landed a resounding knee kick on Naotsugu's face.
No knees! Quit it with the knees!
My liege, I need a rude individual.
And now you're reporting it after the fact?
What had Naotsugu been thinking? He hadn't even tried to protect his face. Closer inspection revealed he was holding a venison skewer in each hand, and that he desperately toughed it out so that he wouldn't drop them. Seeing that, even Serara laughed a little. This is Naotsugu. He's a guardian, a very dependable fighter. He's also vulgar and an idiot. At Shiroi and Akatsuki's explanations, Serara nodded, still smiling. I saw you fight on the front line. I'm sorry my clumsy healing spell couldn't recover you completely.
Don't worry about it,
Naotsugu replied.
You still saved my butt.
Serara apologized repeatedly for her low level, but on that point, Shiroi agreed with Naotsugu. He felt that Serara's focus after she had steeled herself, and her resolute use of all her strength were more than worthy of recognition. In any case, with time, anyone could raise their level. She had nothing to apologize for. Naotsuguchi's always been like this. Please think of him as a ribald person, and pardon him. Besides, Serara, he was complimenting you just then.
Huh?
Serara looked up at Nyanta, who was sitting beside her, his already narrow eyes narrowed further in a shrewd smile. He's saying you're the most popular girl in class. Naotsuguchi's bashful.
Hey, Captain, hold up. That's not how it is. And anyway, I'm less of a pretty girl guy than a pants...
Another of Akatsuki's knee kicks hit home, cutting off Naotsugu's words.
Ow! You're getting more and more ruthless there, short stuff.
My liege, I've caved in the pervert's face. I've also confiscated his meat.
Hey!
Akatsuki was gnawing away at the venison skewer she'd taken from Naotsugu during her lightning-fast knee kick.
That was a total foul!
As Nyanta handed the dejected Naotsugu some fresh grilled venison, he shifted the topic to Akatsuki.
And who's this young lady?
Picking up on the shift, Shiroi began introducing Akatsuki to Nyanta, the girl who'd traveled with him and Naotsugu, an assassin and tracker, a skilled professional, someone who could be relied upon. Akatsuki, who had watched Nyanta fixedly with deadly serious eyes, finally bowed her head and greeted him. "I am Akatsuki, the inexperienced, venerable sage." When Naotsugu started kicking up a fuss about how much differently she treated him, Akatsuki shoved some half-done meat into his mouth.
Short stuff!
"Stupid Naotsugu!" The other three just laughed at their endless squabbling.
"And this is Shiroichi. He's a very intelligent youngster who acted as a counselor for a group I'm used to be part of."
As Shiroi gave a slight nod acknowledging Nyanta's introduction, Sarara seemed overawed and thanked the sorcerer over and over. She's a nice, cheerful girl, Shiroi thought. Absently, he wondered how old she was. From what they could gather, their appearance in this other world was influenced by their bodies in the real world. However, their figures and rough modeling were based on the character data from the Elder Tales MMORPG. Anyone who arbitrarily guessed someone's age based on their height or figure ran the risk of insulting them. Shiroi had learned this through experience from Akatsuki. However, from the way Sarara spoke, he didn't think she could be all that old. A high school kid, or maybe even a middle schooler. Elder Tales had been the sort of game that charged monthly play fees, and therefore tended to have a higher average user age than many other free network games. However, that was just on average, and middle school players weren't rare enough to cause astonishment. Come to think of it, the twins had been about that age. The whole noisy escape from Susukino must have put him on edge. Maybe it was the relief of having reached a safe place, or the feeling of freedom that surrounded the lively meal, but Shiroi found himself thinking back to when he'd met them, just before the catastrophe. To read along with audio light novel, buy the light novel, link in the description.